Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Adam Steele. If you've seen me before, welcome back to the channel. If you haven't, hello, nice to meet you. This is one of our kind of occasional live streams, although admittedly I'm not doing this as a live broadcast because the internet where I am right now is terrible. But what we're going to do, this is not a review, this is a demo. This is going to be quite a long video. This might be an hour plus. What this is we're going to look at the new Line 6 Helix Native. Now, if you're not aware, the Helix is the piece of gear that Line 6 released recently, which is kind of their answer to the Axe FX and the Kemper, which seems to have gone down well with some people, not with others. Usually I've seen that the people it's not gone down well with are usually the people who've already got an Axe FX or a Kemper. But anyway, they've now released the entire way of working with that as a plugin, as a VST plugin and a Pro Tools AAX plugin. And so we're going to go through a lot of the capabilities that it has today. I'm going to grab my trusty Les Paul, which is actually a really versatile Les Paul. This thing's got coil taps and active electronics if I want to use them. Not like EMG active, it's more like kind of a preamp. But I'm going to leave that off most of today, if not all of today. And we're going to switch to the desktop, and you are going to see Line 6 Helix Native in front of us, and it sounds, if I distort it to hell, like this. It's not too bad. I mean, it's hard to get, I think, a bit of a handle on how it really would work in a mix just by throwing some distortion at you and expecting you to know straight away what that is like in context. However, we'll go through some of the things it can do, because a lot of the other plugins that I've used over the recent years that have sounded fantastic have been, like, say, well, my favourite one has been the Thermionic plugins, which are one plugin is one amp, then one plugin is the cab, whereas the Helix stuff is very much the opposite way of thinking, where it's everything in one plugin. So if you're the kind of person who wants a one-stop shop, this is already looking good. This is then putting this on par with plugins like Amplitube in terms of the usability. And if that's your thing, this is definitely going to put this up in contention. Now, let's start with US double norm, which is the first preset you come to, and it sounds like this. That's quite a lot of... I've got the wrong copy of Native open. I've got two copies running, so that when we get to it, we can do stereo stuff. So that's my idiot fault. Right, here we are. So this is actually the US twin reverb on the normal channel, and my headphone amp just went for a dive. So that sounds more like this. Let's just tune it up to... So that's my Les Paul on the humbucker next, so let's go to single coil. That's my poor fretting there. Oh dear. I'm really going to need to find a solution for that, because that is going to get irritating. Let's move the ID. Okay, so I just edited a bit of a fail out there. So, back to business. This. It's very nice clean, I think. And what's turned on here, if we look at this, so it's got volume, dynamics, which is, it's got an MXR compressor in there, distortion, modulation, amp and cab, reverb, and a trem by the look of it. But what's interesting here is that the ones that are lit up are on, the ones that are not lit up are off, which means, say, Minotaur, the distortion pedal there, which I'm guessing is a clone centaur. If we got this super clean sound, if I turn this on, yeah, suddenly, if I open the tone up a little on that, it's brought the noise floor up a bit, but then I would expect it to for something like the Clone Centaur, because that's kind of the kind of distortion pedal it is. I mean, it's not a noisy pedal, but because I'm running into the Audion ID4's DI input, which is great, but is not like £1,000 DI input. If I turn the gain up on that, we get this. That is in single coil mode. In humbucker mode, we get this, which is much lower. And the only noise I can hear is electrical bleed, but... sounded pretty decent to me at 48k. That's what we're running at, by the way. We're running at 48 kHz for anyone who's interested. So let's move on to the Vox AC30, the Essex A30. Yeah, that's definitely got that kind of Brian May thing going on. Now there's an EQ here that's not on right now. Let's see what that does. So that's more of a kind of a mid bump boost. It's very Brian May-ish. There's a delay. Is that turned on? No, it's not. So, oh, quite rockabilly-ish. I have to say, so I'm not usually a preset kind of person, but using these just to have a flick through, these are quite nice. The reverbs have surprised me, actually. I mean, the whole reverb here, it's not the best I've ever heard. That would probably be a Bricasti M7. But a Bricasti M7 unit costs a lot of money, and this doesn't cost nearly that. Turn that off. And yeah, it's quite surprising how much that whole reverb adds and doesn't sound particularly nasty. Let's sit a little closer so that we can not have the headphone incident happen over and over and over. Actually, while I've got no reverb on and I'm on full blast on my neck pickup, I'm just going to see how it deals with cleaning up on the volume, because let's do that on the bridge pickup on single coil mode, because that's something that you definitely couldn't do with the old Line 6 pod stuff, was clean up on the volume, because it just went from fuzz to slightly crappier fuzz. So this, back the volume off to 5. Or even less. I mean, it's getting quieter as I would expect it to, but it's also crystal clear. So they've really gone to the effort of making the amp models distort when they're supposed to and not when they're not supposed to, which I think is quite impressive. Where it says host, actually, it's worth pointing out at this point. You can hear some horrible noise here. If you don't want to add a noise gate pedal, you can actually just add an input gate here. So if you're using an interface that's not particularly clean, for instance, I mean, firstly go out and get yourself a decent interface, but if that's not an option right now, this could save you a lot of hassle in terms of noisy mixes. I would definitely recommend getting a good DI box and a good interface, but if that's not a possibility for you, then hey, this is. Now, let's move on. Let's get Humbuckers going back on here, because my bare knuckle pickups are quite close to the screen and all the technology, and really are picking up a bit of that in single coil mode. I mean, they are humbuckers after all. So let's have a look at Brit Plexi Jump. For anyone who's a classic rock fan, this should be the kind of tone let's get a bit more level on that. Oh, nope. What am I changing there? There's so many things. That's interesting. The master volume on the amp doesn't just change volume, it does what a master output would on the real amp. You'll hear as I bring this master up, you'll hear the top end fizz come in. And again from lower. And from higher. So that's really doing what an amp would by pushing the master power section output. I think that's quite impressive. Now I did want to get more volume out of this, so let's just go to the end host and turn up the level a bit. Now there's a bit of a plate reverb on here. Sounds to my ears like it's mostly coming out the right hand side. Is that panned off to the side? It's worth having a look at in the future. Now let's look at something heavy, the Cali Rectifier. Now this preset it's not a very good demo of a rectifier because it comes with a tube screamer in front with the gain on. So if we turn this off, that's a much more, I think, more accurate tube screamer emulation, not tube screamer, dual rectifier emulation. So, I mean, it's still like, you probably would in modern rock and modern metal use that tube screamer, because that gives you that bite and that articulation that a dual rec doesn't really have. But still, it's one of those things. So, there are loads of different amps in here, loads of different sections. So, let's start with one of the most simple amp settings that we can and turn everything off. If we can, is that possible? Cut. Oh, clear. So I can clear this, clear that, clear this. So the volume, if I had something like a MIDI pedal like the old Behringer FCB 1010, I could use this to change the volume right there, or I could move this to after the amp. This is something that's really nice about the Helix software, is I'm seeing that I can just move amps and effects anywhere in the chain, which means that if I've got some crazy routing idea, then I can do it. And there's also, you see the non to host. I can have a second setup going, so at some point later in this video we'll talk about dual amping. So in the meantime, the volume is there just for if we want it. Let's keep it on full. So the amp that we've got is the Fender Twin US double. There's also the vibrato input, which apparently sounds different. It does as well. Oh, that's interesting. So this is using the 212 double C12N, which I'm guessing is the Jensen speaker. And it, as far as I can tell, it sounds fairly realistic. There's pretty much, if I turn the drive all the way up, that's really, that's what a Fender Twin can do that a lot of models of it don't seem to be able to do, which I think is quite impressive here, because everyone sees a Fender Twin as a super clean amp, and it can do that, and it can do that very well, but if you push it a little bit, you can get a real blues rock growl out of the thing. I mean, you stick a light distortion pedal in front of that, and you've got, like, modern Joe Bonamassa territory. Now, it sounds quite bassy, and just looking, this is an amp and cab module. So this is kind of the simplest way of doing it. So this is A plus C amp and cab. This one module has the amp head and the cab in there. So the cab, let's take that drive down a bit. That's really nice. If I just tickle it, it's clean as a whistle. So that's really got something going on. Now this 212, the mic selected is a 160 ribbon, which is why it sounds, I think, quite bassy and quite full. Let's change this out and see what we've got as choices. So we've got a good old Sm57, Sennheiser 409 and 421. I think that's a Heil PR30, Electrovoice RE20, a Royal 121, a Bayer 160, a Coles 4038, an AKG 414, Neumann KM 184, U867, 87, 47. Let's go with an 87 for a minute. And back it off, so that's early reflections. That's really nice. So instead of having to have a reverb unit, if I want this to be more realistic, what happens in quite a live guitar room is as you back the mic away from the cabinet, you'll get more of these early reflections. Now, if it's a very dead amp room, you'll get none. You'll get that kind of sound. But as you add this in, you'll start to get a bit more of that. So that's overkill, but that should give us get a lot more what I think of as realism in there, which is really quite impressive. So there's now bass mics. Let's go with the 47. Let's put the pick down. There are gigs that I have done in the past where this alone would have been absolutely fine and probably would have been a setup I'd have been happy with. But let's dive a little deeper, shall we? So let's replace the amp and cab with one amp here and one cab next to it. So let's just pick the double C12N. Yep. And stick it on the 47 again. A little way off, some early reflections, and the amp, yeah, so the amp is pretty much the amp we're on. So they're now separate, so that, in my mind at least, means that I've got a better control over changing my mind on separate sections. And if I then want to do something a bit weird, like, I don't know, no, undo. Move the amp. So if I click in this space here and put an optical tremolo, that goes in between the amp and the cab, which is pretty much, if not exactly, how it worked in a Fender twin reverb, or not a twin reverb, in a Vibralux, something like that. So if I just blow that right down. suddenly I've got that tremolo going before any reverb, before even the cab gets to emulating anything. So I'm liking the sound of that. Now let's put that in a room. Let's go over here, click in a blank space, reverb, and click on room. Oh, that's nice. Let's drive down on this a little. Less intense and a little faster. So suddenly I've got a nice big, still a mono guitar, but a nice big modulated signal where I've put the mod in what I consider to be the right place. I've put that before the amp. It doesn't sound like it's doing as much, and if I put it after the cab, it's just doing something a little different. It's affecting those early reflections. If I put it after the verb, it makes the reverb pulse up and down as well, which is not something that I particularly like. So that's why I would put that, and it's really nice for Line 6 to have done this, to be able to just put that where I like. So let's turn off the mod with a little off switch, and suddenly so if you were to use something like a MIDI pedal board, I think you can, automation controller assign. So we could assign the on and off for that to a switch, and then have that on a MIDI or a controller, so that you could just turn that on and off at will without having to change your patch. So maybe if you're the kind of guitarist where you have one amp that you like, but you might have a couple of different distortion pedals, a couple of different effects, you can load them all up in a single preset, kind of like scenes that Axe Effects do, and you can run them all and turn them all on and off with a MIDI pedal, and that's it, you're good to go. Something that's worth noting at this point is this whole crazy routing thing where you can drag things around and you can do some stuff. One thing that you can do is, if I drag the output around, I think it's output, it says output to host. If I change that output to 2A, what that's now doing is that's going all the way down here, then coming out here, which means I've just added an extra whole line of potential effects. So I could load both of these lines up full of effects, and that would be absolutely fine. So back to amp. So there are so many things I could do. Like, let's look in the distortion. There's, I don't know what some of these are. THOMANN? Let's get a good old tube screamer going in front of the So that's a classic 808 tube screamer in front of that Fender Twin. So if I change that from the TS808 to the TS9, oh, apparently that's got more high end. Lot more high end. Compulsive drive, that'll be the full tone OCD by the sound of it. here. And there's loads of different fuzzes, so I could always go. That sounds a lot like a fuzz face to me. I don't think I've used a digital fuzz before that can do that crapping out kind of sound. Wow, I just rolled the guitar volume back and it behaves like a fuzz would. Turn it up. Wow. And there's a few different fuzzes here that I'm sure will sound absolutely disgusting. What's the Obsidian 7000? Whatever it is, I don't like it. Bit Crusher. Okay, that's pretty disgusting, but having this reverb on really helps it not sound like an absolute arse. Right, instead of a distortion then, how about going back to a deluxe comp? So that sounds like it's doing something. Turn that back on. Yeah, my notes sound much more consistent with this compressor. Huh. Then there's always the old MXR Dynacomp, the red squeeze. Studio comp, yeah, it's got a brighter sound. And then there's a 3-band comp. Oh, so like a multi-band compressor. This might be good on bass, actually. We've got a noise gate, of course, which I'm tapping the guitar body at this point, and it's not really coming through. And then there's a hard gate, which I'll probably try. I'll be playing around with that when we get to the heavier tones. Auto swell. I know that my friend Chris was using Amplitude for quite a long time because it was the only decent guitar plugin set that had a swell in it, and now hey, here's a swell. So that's just something. EQs, we've got simple EQ, so that is what it says. If you want more mids, less low, more high, that works. If I put that after the amp, that'll do something very different. Oh, sounds awful. Apologise for that. Blah, blah, blah. Low and high cut. So if there's too much low end in my guitar, or too much high end, that might actually work after the amp to just have maybe 100 and something hertz low cut and a 10k high cut. See how, depending on what you're doing for a mix, that might make your guitar suddenly cut through better without taking up all the headroom. So there's an idea. Or Parametric's got a lot going on. 10-band graphic. and the Cali Q graphic, which looks to me like the Mesa Mark II, Mark IV, you know, that kind of EQ. So that would be great to stick, say, between an amp and a cab if you're not using a Mesa head, but you want to treat an amp like that. Because I believe some of the Mesa models in here already have this built into them, but if it didn't, you could stick that in there. Well, that was nice. It just let me shove that in between two. And yeah, so I'd be able to, you know, suck out some of the mids, add a bit more bass. Because what you do traditionally with Mesa amps for that metal sound is you actually put less bass and more mids into the front of the amp than you need to get that tight sound. Then you compensate with the EQ after the distortion. And that's how you get that big kind of Metallica, kind of Black Album, Justice for All kind of sound. So that's... I'll put that in between the amp and the cab. So that might sound a bit weird in this case, but when we get to the heavier stuff again, we'll see. So the trem we looked at already. There's different tremolos. So there's 60s bias trem. So I'm guessing this is more the Vox style than there's It could be that the this is more like the Fender and AC30 actual power amp style modulation. So there's a tremolo pedal. Harmonic tremolo, which I have no idea what that means. Oh, it sounds almost like a Univibe, but that's this one. Mode. Ugh. There's a real low end on that. It's probably that EQ. Yeah. There's the good old script mod phase. Sounds decent enough. Deluxe flanges. Courtesan flange. That looks like the Electric Mistress. Jet flanger. Chorus, 70s chorus. Oh, that's nice. That's got some vibrato to it. Oh, I'll be using that in my clean tones. Yes, please. Oh, vaporwave, here we come. Plastic chorus. There'll be someone who likes that, but it's not me. AM ring mod. Oh, nice. So if I go 100% mix, I can go. very Incubus, that ring modulator kind of thing. That. Yeah, I like that. I mean, it's horrible, but I like it. So let's look at the delays. Simple delay is what it says. Mod chorus echo. There's more of that niceness to it. Sweep echo. You know what? Let's look at these delays after the amp and we'll change them to stereo. That way, if they've got anything to offer like that that's all stereo, we'll hear the whole thing. So dual delay. Just a bit of a Porcupine Tree reference there for any of you prog nerds. Multi-tap. Ah, awesome. Ping pong, which is exactly as it says. Sweep echo. Oh, so you got that. Oh, a ducking delay. Now a ducking delay is really good for if you've got like a solo going on. So let's just stick a distortion. Oh, no. Let's stick a distortion on here. Just get a bit of grind going, because a ducking delay, and if I start playing and if I play with some some solo stuff, there'll be a little bit of a delay in the background, but in theory at least it won't be taken over because of the ducking. But as soon as I stop playing, maybe let's make that dynamic release a little slower. When I stop playing, that delay comes up. So if I have a bit more feedback and make this more of an epic type delay, so it's got that, 600 milliseconds more feedback. Yeah, you hear how when I stop, it kind of comes in. Pretty useful. Reverse delay is what it says. Vintage digital. Ooh, nice 12-bit delay there. Vintage swell. I'm guessing those are like the... these are line 6's... what do you call them? Echo farm, the pedal. So yes, they've made a model of their own modeling unit. Pitch echo. Ugh, that's weird. So if you're weird and like weird. Ooh, transistor tape. That's got that. It's also got that kind of. That big U2-y kind of thing. Harmony delay. was in A major and it sounded wrong, it's because my guitar's tuned in E flat. So if I go... That's weird. I like it. Bucket Brigade. Oh, that's your classic, like, Boss analog delay pedal. Don't know what Adriatic delay is. Sounds nice though. Adriatic. And Elephant Man looks like the Electroharmonics Memory Man. That's a good way to make an amp sound about 1,000,000 miles wide. Now, back to business. Where are we at? So we've got reverbs, which we'll only briefly touch on. Pitch and synth. So that's it's essentially a whammy, but you really need a controller for that. Twin harmony. So let's go with D sharp major, voice 1 plus a third, and I was already on a third, so D sharp major, 5th. So we should get... I have to say I'm quite impressed with how that's tracking, because a lot of plugins for things like harmony don't track very well. So simple pitch, dual pitch, 3-note generator. So you can make your own soundscapes. Ooh. With a generator that's just available. That's nice. So I could just turn on this generator. Turn the reverb up. Ah, interesting. So there's a few filters. Turn the distortion off. Mystery filter. And auto filter. Ooh. There's oh god, there's so many different wahs. So, and there's going to be like throaty. So it's pretty difficult for me to show the wahs off here. So we get to the end of our journey and there's a little looper as well, apparently send and return. I'm not sure why that's not active, but I'm guessing that with the real Helix that's for the send and return, so you can put real effects pedals in the loop. Now, turn off the wah and get back to looking at... So let's go back to amp and cab and talk about... Let's just keep using this... let's go back to talking about amp and cab. Let's say that out of all these cabs, I can't find one that I like. just for argument's sake, I can change this cab section out for the impulse response section. And there's 1024 or 2048, so that's kind of like lower quality and higher quality. I'm going to go with the higher quality one because why wouldn't I? Now, then you've got IR select, which is just a number. So what do you do with that? On the left, there's presets and then there's impulses. So if I bring up this list, I right now have already loaded one impulse response in, and it's a Celestian Greenback 412. But this seems to be quite clever because this means that I don't need a separate impulse loader. I've got an inbuilt high cut and low cut there that I can use, and because there's a big massive list, I can load a load of impulses in, and then I can change with a preset or with the pedal or whatever. I can change which one I'm using straight away. I think that's very, very impressive. That's mostly the reverb there. So I can just number 2 import, and I can import, say, maybe the fat version of this. So I could go IR select 2. There's not that much difference. I'll take the level down on this a bit. But let's go for something from one of my different ones. Let's go for a vintage 30 and an open back 112. 48k, 500 milliseconds, with a Royal 121 maybe. I'm just pulling one out almost at random. So vintage 30, completely different. So if I go IR3 now. Now you don't get the control with an impulse response that you will with their cab modeling, because this is now a fixed entity, but I could have a massive list of them and switch between them. And if you've got a preference of impulse responses over their own cabs, so something like, I don't know, the own Hammer or Red Wires or whatever, the Celestian Plus ones that I use when I'm not using my own Wall of Sound plugins. I mean, this is to demonstrate Line 6's stuff. Then there's so much to go at here. It's incredible. Now, with the cab number 2, no, number 1, it's my favourite. Let's turn off the distortion, have a look at some of the different amps. So, let's start with Who Watt, which is a high watt. So I'm now running my Les Paul full whack. Let's turn the IR up a little bit again. So my Les Paul's pretty high, so the bass is high up for some reason. I'm guessing that's this is almost what you would use by default on the high watts. It's really interesting that you've got sag, hum, ripple, bias, and a different bias control there. I'm not the kind of person that would use them. I like to use amps fairly stock, but it's nice that they're there. Soup Pro is something like Soup Pro Thunderbolt. There's a Gibson. That's really nice. So if I push the mids on that, I get a real Queens of the Stone Age kind of sound. That's going through that Celestian Greenback response. If we decided let's push the distortion into this. Yeah. Cool. So there's then a Fender Tweed. The normal and the right. US Small, is that a Champ? Deluxe. They've really gone to town with their Fender stuff here, so let's just move on. Mail order. Divided by 13, divided duo. Dr. Z. If that's your kind of thing. There's the old JC120. I'm guessing the actual chorus isn't built in with this. But I'm pretty sure if we put a chorus in here and turn that on, chorus, 70s chorus? That sounds like a certain song that we all know. So, moving back on, let's turn off the mod. So there's a Vox AC13, AC15 even. There's the Vox AC30, which of course you can do. And so on and so on. It's AC Fawn, which I'm guessing is a different model. The Matchless. Some of these seem to be disabled. Maybe it's unless I use them in the amp and cab model because they use, I don't know, too much processing or something. There's an Orange. Good old J45, Marshall. It's just, maybe it's just running out of processing power, which seems a bit odd for a PC, but maybe they've just ported the entire thing wholesale. So we've just brought in like the plexi on jump, which is going to be nice. Then there's the Park, the 75 watt. It's got a very 70s sound to it. If I take some bass out of that, it's got a bit of that going on. 2204 is one of the original Marshall JCM 800s. So we're getting into that classic. If I put Tube Scream in front of that with the gain kind of middled. We're getting to that very definite mid-80s kind of tone there. Even still stands up in modern stuff, so let's have a look at some of these. The German, is that the Bogner Uberschall? Not Bogner Uberschall, the it is a Bogner, Shiva. A lot of guys like those because it's a clean drive, and the actual clean channel on the Shiva, I've used one. It's so clean, it's silly. There we got the Bogner Uberschall. Okay, now we're getting on to all the heavy stuff, so I'm quickly going to go over to the IR and replace it with one that a metal guy would use, which would be a Vintage 30 closed back 412. Sorry I'm flying through this, but I want to get into using these as fast as I reasonably can. So Sm57 Balancer, so that's number 4. So that should be So that's the sound of a kind of a modern. So we've got California 4, so it's a Mesa Mark 4. Rhythm 1 is kind of cleaner. You can get a bit of a bluesy sound out of it. Rhythm 2's got more to it, and the lead is definitely where it's at in terms of getting that whole. Oh yeah, you see how getting that pushed, getting that dip down, getting these pushed. That's how you get your Mesa V, and then you go back to take some bass out, push some more mids and a bit more treble, a bit more presence, maybe a little more gain, and suddenly you'll have this. Yeah, so I'm wondering if maybe the there's a bit of something in this impulse response that's messing with the accuracy here. Get very John Petrucci with this if you put a little bit of delay underneath it. Let's turn on that alpha man. Enough of that, but yeah, you're starting to get the idea. So then there's the rectifier, which is the big fat heavy monster that we all know and love from the early 2000s, late 90s. That the bass response is just no. Big fat bottom end, but also that chunky, very saturated mid, so you can get that. That's quite impressive for a rectifier demo, because it's got that solid. It must be on the Red Modern channel, and it doesn't just sound like a wall of bees. If I back my volume off, I'll bet. Yeah, I know for one interesting piece that a lot of guitarists who use dual rectifiers will back the volume off and get that slightly crunchy, not quite clean. That kind of. Yeah, it's something that's quite common with high gain American amps is to get that not quite clean tone out of them. But there you go. If I wind my volume back up, I'm instantly back in fire breathing mode. Now let's have a look at the Archetype, which is actually it's supposed to be a PRS Archon, which if I go to the lead channel is, as far as I'm told, essentially a diesel VH4. So we should get quite a tight, heavy gain tone. And we do. That's nice, and that's one I'll probably use if I end up using the Helix Native beyond its 12 remaining days of the trial. There's the Angle Fireball. Not my kind of sound at all, but if you want the Angle sound, there it is. Soldano. And of course the one that everyone wants, the Soldano's overdrive channel. So it's got a very aggressive, crunchy mid-range, which of course, Soldano. There's a 5150. Does what we all expect it to do. Then there's a lot of Line 6's own. There's the 2204 mod. Which sounds like a hot-rodded JCM 800, so it's very kind of Slayer-y, kind of Megadeth-y. So it's quite crunchy, but it's also not necessarily the highest gain, which means when you're scratching around doing thrash, you can get that definition out of it. There's the electric. I'm guessing the Doom is just sustaining for days. I don't know what the Epic's about. There's the Fatality. Let's see what that is. Ugh, all low end. No, thank you. Not for me. Litigator. I think this is quite dumble-ish. So if I was playing on a Strat, I think this would be much more appealing. And then there's the Badonk. Which, again, for my personal taste, is disgusting. But the fact that it's there is nice. So, and then if you go to preamp, you can actually have the preamp sections and then send them through, maybe send them through a real amp if that's your thing. So they're all there as, and then there's the guitar which drops down and has the bass options, which I will cover in another video. I will go and grab a bass and get that all set up and then do a bass demo, because as much as some people say, oh, I don't even use an amp for bass these days, I still do quite a lot. I use things like, quite often I'll use an SVT in parallel with the clean channel, or I might use some sort of bass drive from a pedal, but also the meat from an amp, and doing it all in the box is so much easier. So if this sounds anything like reasonable, it may work its way into my setup as well. So there's a lot to go at here, including the routing, the impulses, the presets, and there's just so much you can do. I'm starting to be impressed by this, so I'm going to do, I think, 2 more videos because I'm running out of time today. One of the videos is going to be using the Line 6 in a mix to replace other virtual guitar amps that I've used. And then another one is going to be demoing the bass stuff and doing the same with that and replacing bass in a mix with the Helix and see what that's like. So I'll probably be able to film those tomorrow, get those up during this week, because of course I've got to do it all before the trial runs out unless I actually decide to buy it. Now that's something that's worth talking about, is the buying of it. So let me switch to the main camera a minute. It's about $400, which sounds like a lot, but how much have I just showed you here? So much that there's so much going on. Just put my guitar down because it's starting to hurt my leg. There's so much to go at that if you find this useful, I mean, it's half the price of the hardware units. So if you only record with a computer, or if you go out live with a laptop anyway with an interface, this might just be the solution for you. Because rather than, a lot of guys will do things like they'll use MIDI to patch change their presets mid-show. You wouldn't even have to have a separate piece of gear and all the MIDI and everything. You just have this in the box, and you just have the DI box going into the same interface that might be providing, I don't know, your backing track, your click track for your drummer, all the things that your band would need if you're that kind of band. And that's it. It's simple. It's done. It's loaded in. If you've got an interface that's got low enough latency, job done. That's it. And if you just record in a bedroom or in a studio, I mean, hell, a lot of guys use Axe Effects and Kempers in the studio anyway. So how different is this if you work in the box anyway and you've got low latency input? So it's worth having to think about, because if everything's in one box, it's simple and it sounds good. That's the killer combo right there. So thanks for watching, and I'm Adam Steele for the Hot Pole Studios. We'll see you in the next video. Stick around for the Monday and Friday stuff. Check us out on Facebook if you haven't already, because we need people to get following us there to build that up. Hot Pole Studios. Check us out on Twitter as well, Hot Pole Studios. Any questions you've got, fire away. And check out our Patreon campaign, because that's how we kind of pay for extra things like there's a video coming up where we're installing Linux on a PlayStation 2. And yes, a PlayStation 2, not a PlayStation 3. And we're going to do some audio production on a PlayStation 2 to kind of prove the point that you really don't need the latest and greatest of everything in terms of, you don't need the most beastly production computer in the world. I mean, yes, it helps if you do what I do or what some of you guys do, which is the really advanced multi-track stuff. But in terms of just getting something recorded and getting it down, you really don't need something crazy. So stick around for the PS2 video. But yeah, the parts for that were bought by you guys through Patreon. So if you help us out with those kind of crazy videos, we can do something to really entertain you guys. So thanks for watching again. I'm Adam Steele for the Hot Pole Studios, and I'll see you in the next video. Ciao for now. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this, feel free to check out our other videos, as you can find here, or check out our Facebook and Twitter, or our Patreon page, which helps us to make more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.